Gabriella Jensen wasn't expecting her life to change because of a missing cat poster and a piece of soggy tape stuck to the side of a coffee shop window. She was late for her shift at the bookstore, juggling a half-eaten banana, her tote bag, and an umbrella that refused to stay open, when she paused almost unconsciously to look at the photo of a large, fluffy gray cat with a diamond-studded collar. The words missing were bold and desperate. The reward? Substantial. She narrowed her eyes at the poster. Who even used a word like substantial? And who gave their cat a diamond collar? But what really caught her attention was the address listed at the bottom. It was in the ritzy part of town, near the hilltop mansions behind the black iron gates. The kind of place that had private security, fountains in front yards, and driveways paved with stone instead of cracked cement. Gabriella rolled her eyes. Of course, it's a rich person's cat. Still, something tugged at her. Maybe it was the cat's name Clementine. Or maybe it was the look in its eyes, like it was bored of its pampered life and ready for an adventure. She snapped a photo of the poster just in case. 3 days later, Gabriella found Clementine hiding behind the dumpsters outside her apartment building, hissing at a raccoon. "Oh my God," she whispered, crouching carefully with a piece of leftover salmon from her fridge. "You are seriously lost, aren't you?" The cat eyed her like she was beneath her, but hunger won. Clementine padded forward and took the fish. Gabriella wrapped her gently in a towel, ignoring the scratch on her forearm, and carried her upstairs. After a quick bath, which was a battle of wills she barely survived, Gabriella looked at the phone number on the poster and hesitated. She didn't know why. Maybe it was the idea of talking to someone rich. People with money never really looked at her. They talked over her, handed her credit cards without eye contact, and got impatient if she didn't ring them up fast enough. She took a breath and called anyway. A deep male voice answered on the second ring. "Hello? Hi, I think I found your cat," she said. "The one from the poster, Clementine?" There was a pause. You have her." "Yes, she's fine. I cleaned her up a little. She was behind a dumpster, so, not her usual scene, I guess." His laugh was low and surprised. "That sounds exactly like her. Where are you? I'll come get her right now." 15 minutes later, a sleek black car pulled up to her curb. Not just any car, a vintage black Aston Martin with perfect chrome and a driver in a suit. Gabriella stared from her third-floor window, holding Clementine like a baby. "You've got to be kidding me." A man stepped out, tall, broad shoulders, dark navy coat that probably cost more than her month's rent. He didn't look like someone who'd be frantic over a cat, until he saw Clementine in her arms. "Clementine," he breathed, walking toward her building. Gabriella opened the front door just as he reached the steps. The man looked up and his eyes locked with hers. He was unfairly handsome. Sharp jaw, dark hair with just enough of a curl to look accidental, and eyes the color of stormy skies. "I'm Xander Grant," he said, stepping closer. His voice was smooth, confident. "You found her." Gabriella nodded, trying not to feel like she was holding royalty. "She gave me a scratch, but I think we bonded over salmon." He smiled at that. Really smiled. "That actually sounds like her." She handed Clementine over carefully, but the cat squirmed in Xander's arms and leapt back onto Gabriella's shoulder with a little meow. Xander blinked. "She likes you." Gabriella laughed awkwardly. "I guess she's not ready to go back to luxury just yet." He glanced around at the cracked sidewalk and the graffiti on the mailbox. "You live here?" Gabriella's spine stiffened. "Yeah, I do." His jaw tensed, like he hadn't meant to sound judgy. "Sorry, that came out wrong. I just meant thank you for taking care of her. I've been worried sick." She softened. "It's okay. She's a handful, but she's sweet." He hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a black card. "Please, let me repay you. You can name the amount." Gabriella frowned at the card like it was poison. "I don't want money." Xander blinked. "You don't?" No, she stepped back. I just wanted to get her home safe. He looked stunned. Most people would have taken the reward and ran. Well, I'm not most people, she said, tucking a piece of hair behind her ear. He stared at her for a moment longer and then did something that surprised her. He smiled again. But this time it wasn't polite. It wasn't practiced. It was real. Can I at least take you to dinner? As a thank you. Gabriella blinked. Dinner. I promise no strings. Just gratitude. And maybe I'd like to get to know the woman who didn't want anything from me. She hesitated. You don't even know my name. Then tell me, he said, watching her with quiet intensity. She licked her lips. Gabriella. Gabriella Jensen. Gabriella, he repeated, like he was testing how it felt in his mouth. Nice to meet you. She looked at Clementine, who was now purring on her shoulder like she lived there. Okay, she said. But I'm picking the place. Xander raised a brow. Deal. What started as dinner at a local Thai place turned into 3 hours of conversation. He didn't talk about money or his fancy cars. He asked her about books, her dreams, what kind of childhood she had. He laughed at her jokes. He looked at her like she was the most interesting thing in the room. And when they stepped out into the cool night air, he brushed her hand with his and said, Can I see you again? Gabriella should have said something clever, but all she could do was nod. As Xander opened the car door for her and she slid into the back seat beside him with Clementine curled smugly in her lap, she had no idea this was just the beginning. She had no idea that the man with the missing cat would soon ask for her hand. Gabriella didn't expect to be standing in front of a sprawling estate with ivy-covered walls, staring at a gate that looked like it belonged in a museum catalog. But 2 days after that dinner, a black envelope had arrived at the bookstore during her shift. It was hand-delivered with no return address, only her name scrawled in elegant handwriting. Inside was an invitation, heavy ivory cardstock, embossed lettering, an art gallery opening Xander's gallery. He hadn't mentioned owning one. He hadn't mentioned owning anything, really. Now, standing outside a property that made her feel like she'd wandered into someone else's life, she was wondering why she'd agreed to come at all. A man in a dark suit opened the gate before she could buzz. Miss Jensen? She nodded. This way, please. She followed him up a winding path lined with lanterns. The gallery was behind the main residence, a separate pavilion with glass walls and soft golden lights spilling out into the garden. Inside, classical music floated through the air, and people in tailored suits and floor-length gowns sipped champagne while analyzing brushstrokes with the seriousness of diplomats. Gabriella tugged at the sleeve of her navy wrap dress. It was the nicest thing she owned, borrowed from her friend Maya. She felt like a house cat dropped into a room full of panthers. Then she saw him. Xander stood near a sculpture installation, speaking with an older woman in pearls. His profile was sharper in this lighting, lit from behind like some kind of cinematic reveal. When he turned and spotted her, his expression changed. Not in the way people notice someone they recognized. It was more like he'd been waiting for her. He crossed the room without another word to the woman. You came, he said, pausing with a breath that sounded like relief. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't, Gabriella admitted. I don't really do this. You mean art or parties with too much jewelry? Both. He grinned. You're not wrong. She glanced around. Is this all yours? The gallery? Yes. The artists are all local. I try to keep it that way. Something flickered in her. That's unexpected. Because I have an expensive car? Because most rich people don't treat art like something that belongs to everyone. His smile changed then, became quieter. That's a good way to put it. A waiter passed by with a tray of flutes, and Xander took two, handing her one. Come with me. I want to show you something. He led her through a side corridor lined with photographs, black and white portraits, all of children. Some smiling, some serious, all captured with aching clarity. These are from a shelter in Cape Town, he said. I fund the school there. Gabriella glanced at him. Why? Because I can, he said simply. And because someone did it for me once. He didn't elaborate, and she didn't press. There was an intimacy in the way he said it, like it was a truth he didn't share often. They stepped into a smaller room, dimly lit, with a single sculpture in the center. A bronze casting of a woman curled forward, her hands covering her face. The plaque read, "The Weight of Silence." Gabriella stared at it, unable to look away. "It's painful." "It's honest," he said. "Sometimes that's harder." She nodded. "Did you make this one?" "No," he said, "but I commissioned it. It reminded me of someone." When she turned to meet his eyes, he was already watching her. "You seem like someone who understands what it means to carry things quietly." She didn't know what to say to that, so she took a sip of champagne and looked back at the sculpture. "I wasn't sure what to expect tonight," she said finally. "And? I'm still not sure what this is." He stepped closer. "This? This is me hoping you'll let me show you more than just my name on a gallery wall." Gabriella turned toward him fully. "You don't even know what I want." "Then tell me." She hesitated. "I want to matter to someone. Not because I'm useful or easy or convenient. I want to be seen, not just looked at." Xander didn't answer right away, but when he did, it wasn't with words. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small velvet box. Gabriella took a step back. "Wait, what is this?" He opened it slowly, revealing a ring that shimmered like starlight. Not a diamond, but a pale sapphire set in platinum, elegant and old. Antique, maybe. Certainly not something bought on impulse. "I'm not asking for your answer tonight," he said, "but I want you to know where this is going. I didn't meet you by accident, and I haven't stopped thinking about you since." Her heart thundered in her chest. "We've only just met." "I know," he said, "but sometimes you just know." She looked at the ring, then back at him. "You're serious? Have I said anything that wasn't?" She took a slow breath. "This is insane." Xander's gaze didn't waver. "It doesn't have to be." The music from the other room drifted in, muted and soft. Gabriella looked down at the ring again. It was beautiful, terrifying, completely surreal. "I need time," she said. "You'll have it." She handed the box back, but he shook his head. "Keep it. Just don't lose it." Her fingers curled around it instinctively. "I don't know what you see in me." "I see everything you try to hide," he said, brushing a hand against her arm. "And I like all of it." She didn't answer. Couldn't. The room tilted slightly, not from the champagne, but from the weight of something beginning. As Xander led her back into the light, Gabriella knew nothing about her life was going to stay the same. Gabriella didn't answer his calls for 3 days. Not because she was angry. Not because she didn't care. But because she did. And that terrified her far more than the idea of stepping into a world where people wore designer suits to breakfast and dropped 6 figures on art without blinking. She tucked the ring box into the back of her closet behind a stack of old journals and a shoebox of rejection letters from publishing houses. Every time she caught sight of it, something inside her shifted like the ground beneath her life had cracked open, and she wasn't sure if she was supposed to jump or run. On the 4th day, a package arrived at the bookstore. It wasn't wrapped in glitz or gold ribbon, just a plain gray box with her name written in black ink. Inside was a single item, a first-edition hardcover of a novel she'd mentioned offhandedly at their dinner, one she hadn't been able to afford when it came out. Nestled between the pages was a card. No message, just a pressed violet. She didn't call him after that. She showed up. The doorman at the gallery recognized her immediately and led her through a quiet side entrance. It was early before opening hours, and the space was nearly silent save for the faint hum of security lights. Her footsteps echoed on the polished floor as she made her way through the main exhibit room until she found him. Xander stood alone in front of a canvas taller than he was, hands in his pockets, the collar of his shirt slightly wrinkled like he hadn't slept. "I wasn't expecting you," he said without looking at her. "I wasn't sure I was coming." He turned then. His expression wasn't angry. It was something closer to wary hope, like he thought she might vanish if he moved too quickly. "I didn't send the book to change your mind. I know. I just wanted you to know I listen." Gabriella rested her hand on the back of a leather bench. You asked me to keep a ring I didn't even ask for. I didn't ask you to wear it. You didn't have to. That box was heavy. He crossed his arms, exhaling slowly. You think I'm trying to buy something that can't be bought. She met his eyes. Aren't you? No, he said. But I am trying to hold on to something before it slips away. She moved closer, slowly. Why me? Because you don't see me as a bank account. Or a name on a building. You see me like I'm just a man. And I haven't had that in a long time. Gabriella studied him, noting the faint shadow beneath his jaw, the way his posture was just slightly off-center, like he wasn't used to being this exposed. What happened to your family? She asked quietly. Xander blinked, then looked away toward the glass wall overlooking the courtyard. They died. Plane crash. I was 21. She didn't respond. There weren't words for that kind of grief. Not ones that didn't sound like pity. I spent years building walls instead of homes, he continued. I thought if I filled the space with enough things, art, cars, headlines, I wouldn't have to feel the silence. And now it's louder than ever. Gabriella reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the box. She didn't hand it to him. She set it on the bench between them. I don't want to ring until I know you trust me enough to let me hear the silence too. He looked at the velvet lid, then at her. What would it take? For starters? Stop trying to impress me. Start being honest. Everything I've said to you has been real. I'm not saying it hasn't. But I need to be sure you're not offering me all this because you're lonely. Or because I'm the first person who didn't flinch when you showed me the size of your world. I'm offering it because when you walked into my life, everything finally made sense. That's not love. That's salvation, she said, voice quiet. And I'm not here to rescue you. Something in his expression shifted. Not defensiveness, but recognition. I don't want to be rescued, he said. I want to be chosen. Gabriella's throat tightened. Then let me choose. In my time, I will. She turned toward the exit, then paused. You said someone helped you once. When your family died. He nodded. A teacher. She gave me a place to stay. Helped me get into school. I named the foundation after her. Gabriella smiled faintly. You could have led with that. I didn't want to sound noble. Try sounding real instead. It's a better look. He didn't follow her as she walked out, and that told her more than any grand gesture ever could. That night, Gabriella sat on her fire escape with a cup of tea and Clementine curled beside her. The city buzzed below, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she was on the outside of everything. She placed the ring box on the metal railing and opened it slowly. The sapphire gleamed in the moonlight, quiet and beautiful. She wasn't ready to wear it, but she hadn't given it back either. It was just past 6 in the evening when Gabriella stepped into the ballroom of the Langford Hotel, her heels clicking softly against the marble as she was ushered through a pair of arched doors. She hadn't planned on attending the fundraiser. In fact, she declined the invitation 3 times before finally calling Xander herself. I'll come, she'd said the night before, but only if you don't introduce me like I'm part of your collection. I'd never do that, he'd said. But I might introduce you as the woman I haven't been able to stop thinking about. Now, as the doors closed behind her, she felt every eye in the room shift in her direction. Not because of who she was, but because of who they knew she had arrived for. She found him standing beyond a row of tall windows, near the balcony that overlooked the city skyline. His back was to her, shoulders straight beneath a midnight-colored suit. His cufflinks glinted as he turned, as if he'd sensed her before she'd even walked in. You came, he said, crossing the space between them. Gabriella held his gaze. I wanted to see if you meant what you said. I did. She glanced around. There's a lot of money in this room. There's a lot of posturing. Not the same thing. Is that why you invited me? To shake the cage a little? No. I invited you because tonight matters to me. And I wanted you here when it did. She looked past him then toward the second floor where a silent auction was underway. There were paintings, sculptures, even a pair of signed ballet slippers encased in glass. A tall banner read, The Grant Foundation, Education Before Opportunity. Gabriella turned back to him. Is that your motto? It's the one that kept me from collapsing. A waiter passed by and Xander took a glass of water, offering it to her instead of champagne. You hate bubbly, he said. She blinked. You remembered. I remember everything you tell me. Especially the things you don't mean to. Gabriella accepted the glass and took a sip, her throat dry. What happens after tonight? He didn't hesitate. I take a step back from the company. I've been grooming a new CEO and the board doesn't know it yet, but this is my last official event. Gabriella stared. You're stepping away from the empire you built? I'm not walking away. I'm making space. For what? For a life I haven't lived yet. She set the glass down on a nearby table. You're doing this because of me? I'm doing it because of me. But you're the reason I realized I wanted something different. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out an envelope thinner than the one with the invitation, but just as deliberate. He handed it to her. She opened it carefully. Inside was a deed. A bookstore. Not hers, but one she'd told him about once in passing during their second dinner. A place in the village that had gone under 3 years ago when the rent tripled. You bought this. I'm donating the property to you. The name stays. You renovate it how you want. You stock it however you like. And it's yours to run or lease or sell. Gabriella's voice caught. Why? Because you said once that story saved you. I thought maybe you'd want a place to return the favor. She stared at the paper, then at him. You didn't need to do this. I know. But I wanted to. Not to impress you. To show you that I see you. Her fingers tightened on the edge of the envelope. This isn't a proposal. No, he said. But it's a promise. That I'm not trying to change you. That I want a life where we build something together, not just buy it. The music inside shifted and someone announced the beginning of the final auction item. Xander glanced toward the stage, then back at her. I have one more thing to offer you, he said. She arched a brow. Does it come with a property deed too? No. Just a question I haven't asked since the moment I met you. He held out his hand, palm up, steady. I'm in love with you, Gabriella Jensen. I don't want a life built on diamonds and dinners. I want mornings with coffee and late nights with books left open on the floor. I want arguments over whose turn it is to do the dishes and laughter in the middle of grocery store aisles. I want a life with you. Will you marry me? There was no ring this time. No velvet box. Just a man offering his whole self without polished edges. Gabriella took a long breath. I don't need the gallery or the bookstore or the view from your penthouse, she said slowly. But I want the man who gave them all away just to make room for love. She slid her hand into his. Yes. The room faded. The music, the lights, the whispers, they all fell away. Xander leaned in, resting his forehead against hers. You just made me the richest man alive, he whispered. You were already that, she murmured. Now you're just finally spending it right. The applause began before either of them realized the crowd had been watching. But it didn't matter, because in that moment, on that balcony, beneath a sky full of stars and a future wide open in front of them, nothing else existed. They didn't need to say anything else. The answer had already been written between every word they'd spoken since the day Clementine wandered into her arms. And now, Gabriella wasn't just holding a cat. She was holding a life she had never dared to imagine and a man who would never stop choosing her. The wind curled around Gabriella's shoulders as she stepped out onto the terrace of the newly restored bookshop. The scent of fresh paint was still faint in the air, mingling with the sharper notes of city summer hot pavement, gasoline, and the sweetness of a nearby bakery just starting its early morning batch of croissants. Below, the storefront gleamed, its vintage wooden sign reinstalled with care, the letters painted in a deep hunter green edged in gold, Whitman and Wild. The windows displayed first editions Gabriella had picked out herself, along with handwritten quotes and tiny vases of wildflowers. It looked like it had always belonged there, like it had always been hers. Xander leaned against the doorway behind her, his tie undone, sleeves rolled, a coffee cup in each hand. You're up early, he said, handing her one. Gabriella took it, fingers brushing his. Couldn't sleep. I still don't believe it's real. His mouth curved as he sipped. You said that yesterday. And the day before. Because it still feels like I'm going to wake up and we'll be back on opposite sides of the city, pretending we didn't collide. We didn't collide, he said. We rewrote the ending. She paused, watching the city stretch and blink awake with the rising sun. You could have built this place anywhere. I didn't want to build it. I wanted to give you the space to. She turned to face him. It's more than a building. I know, he said, resting his hand on her hip. It's a beginning. Inside, the bookshelves were already stocked. The custom reading nook tucked beneath the tall window had cushions embroidered with poetry lines, and the register counter had been carved from reclaimed cherrywood. But it wasn't the details that made Gabriella's chest ache with something too big to name, it was the knowledge that all of it had been shaped by her hands, her vision, and that he had made no attempt to reshape it. Later that afternoon, the soft opening began. Just a few friends, some curious locals, and a couple of reviewers who'd gotten wind of the shop's revival. Maya arrived first, dragging a giant bouquet and wearing a grin so wide it practically split her face. You're glowing, she whispered, pulling Gabriella into a hug. Like actual, cosmic-level glow. What are you using on your skin? Love, Gabriella teased. Expensive, inconvenient, wildly unpredictable love. Maya raised a brow. He better be inconvenient. That's how you know it's real. They both looked over to where Xander had made himself useful behind the espresso station. Sleeves still pushed up, chatting with a teenager about a graphic novel series neither of them could pronounce. He's a terrible barista, Gabriella murmured. But he's good at showing up, Maya said. And he's not running. That counts more. By evening, the crowd had thinned, and Gabriella found herself curled on the reading nook bench with her shoes kicked off and Xander's jacket draped across her legs. He sat beside her, back against the bookshelf, one arm draped casually over the edge of the cushion behind her. You didn't say what you thought of the last surprise, he said, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. Gabriella opened it slowly. It was a letter dated 3 days prior from the licensing board for the New York Literary Arts Council. You applied? She asked, scanning the words. For a city grant to run literacy nights? I didn't apply, he said. You did. You just didn't know it. Her mouth fell open. I found the application on your desk. You never submitted it. So I did. She read the approval line again. They said yes. They said hell yes. Gabriella laughed, the sound bursting out of her like sunlight. You're an infuriating man. And you're the most extraordinary woman I've ever known, he said softly. Her smile faded into something gentler. You're not afraid anymore, are you? I'm still afraid, he admitted. But now I know what I'd lose if I let that fear win. She leaned into him, resting her forehead against his. So what now? He kissed her temple. Now we open the doors. We fill this place with stories. And we make one of our own. The official grand opening happened a week later on a Sunday morning flooded with golden light. Gabriella wore a white linen dress with a ribbon in her hair, and Xander stood beside her in jeans and a crisp shirt that had a tiny ink stain from earlier that morning when he'd tried to help with signage. They cut the ribbon together. The crowd clapped. Clementine, now the shop's unofficial mascot, graced the window seat like she'd owned it for years, her diamond collar long gone, replaced with a soft green one that matched the shop's sign. After the guests had trickled out and the last bouquet was placed in water, Xander pulled Gabriella toward the staircase that led to the loft above the shop. She hadn't been up there in 2 days, not since the last coat of paint. She paused at the top step. What did you do? He pushed open the door. It was a home. Their home. A small living space with open windows, a kitchen island stacked with cookbooks, a record player humming quietly in the background. The bed was tucked beneath a skylight, and on the far wall, beneath a row of framed vintage book covers, was a simple wooden table set for two. Gabriella turned to him, speechless. I didn't want to leave at night, he said. And I didn't want you to go either. So I asked myself what it might look like to stay. She walked in slowly, taking it all in. You did this without asking? I hoped you'd forgive me. She turned, eyes shining. I don't want to leave either. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out the sapphire ring, the same one she had kept hidden for weeks. Without a word, she slid it onto her finger. Xander's breath caught. She smiled. I'm choosing you. Not because of what you've given me, but because of who you are when there's nothing left to give. He stepped forward, cupping her face. Say it again. I'm choosing you. His kiss was slow, deep, reverent. And when they sat down to dinner that night, just the two of them, barefoot, surrounded by books and candlelight, they didn't talk about the past. They didn't talk about the money or the gallery or the things they'd both lost. They talked about the future. About the literary nights they'd host. About the kids who'd find magic on their shelves. About the words they'd write, the stories they'd live. And when the stars blinked awake above the skylight, Gabriella rested her head on Xander's chest and whispered, "This is the chapter one didn't know I was waiting for." He kissed her hair and replied, "Then let's never stop writing it." And they didn't. Not ever.